I have a question for you. Do you remember Blockbuster? Blockbuster, also known as Blockbuster Video, was a place you could go to rent movies and video games, which sounds like a strange concept in modern times because why would you rent something you could just stream? But back in the day, renting was the only way people could watch new movies, other than buying a copy. And Blockbuster stood as a giant in the video rental industry. At its peak in 2004, they had over 9,000 stores worldwide with revenue in the multi-billions, with a B. But today, in 2022, Blockbuster has just one store, and a total of 3 employees. Yet, when the topic of Blockbuster gets brought up, it seems almost everyone remembers it in a positive light, myself included. So much so, I still carry around my family's old Blockbuster card. But the other day, I realized all these years I've been wrong about why Blockbuster failed. Because the most popular narrative that surrounds the demise of Blockbuster is Netflix started existing and killed them off. But the problem with this is it paints a tiny fraction of a large picture that's often overlooked. And that's not to say Netflix didn't play a part or contribute to the death of Blockbuster, but I believe their role is overstated, and find it sad that many reasons for Blockbuster's failure are buried under the idea that it was solely Netflix which killed them off. Because I believe there's a lot we can learn from the rise and fall of Blockbuster and the mistakes they made along the way. The first Blockbuster opened on October 19th, 1985 in Dallas, Texas. But it didn't start out as a video rental store. Blockbuster began as a failing software company started by data specialist David Cook. In 1978, David founded a company called Cook Data Services. The goal of the company was to provide software to the oil and gas industries all over Texas. But David had a serious problem. Cook Data Services was doing terrible. It wasn't making the money he hoped and had to find a way to support he and his wife. So he began looking for new business opportunities and studied the video industry as a possible new venture and concluded it would be a wise place to invest his money. But at the time, didn't have the extra cash lying around to start a video rental store. So he sold off a subsidiary of Cook Data Services and used the profits to open the first Blockbuster store. When Blockbuster first opened in 1985, they stood out like a sore thumb, but in all the right ways. Cook saw that many of the existing video rental stores were mom and pop shops, which carried a small selection of big title movies and displayed them behind the counter to discourage theft. But Cook saw the issues with this business model and improved upon it. From the start, Blockbuster had 10 or 20 times the amount of movies their competitors had. And instead of displaying movies behind the counter, they put them up on shelves so customers could pick them up and interact with them. But most importantly, Blockbuster had a computerized, streamlined system for inventory and checkout, a major component mom and pop shops were lacking. So when Blockbuster opened its doors in the mid-80s, they blew everyone's mind because at the time, no other video rental store had this much variety and efficiency. But in 1987, everything changed when Waste Management co-founder Wayne Huizenga came on as an investor. Wayne and 2 of his friends invested $18.5 million in exchange for 60% of the company. And while founder David Cook at first described it as a very friendly transition, he and Huizenga soon had a professional disagreement, which ended with Cook leaving his own company, selling his shares for around $12 million, leaving Blockbuster's fate in the hands of Wayne Huizenga. But Huizenga didn't help Blockbuster grow. He helped it explode into a global phenomenon. Because by 1993, Blockbuster had over 3,600 locations worldwide. Throughout the 1990s, Blockbuster became a billion-dollar company and continued opening new stores. But still, Huizenga worried about how new technology could impact their future business. And with the growth of cable television and on-demand video, he felt threatened, but didn't have a solution on how to combat these growing issues. So in 1994, he opted to sell Blockbuster to Viacom for $8.4 billion. In 1997, Taco Bell's president, John Antioco, resigned from the company to become the CEO of Blockbuster. And he wasted no time making bad decisions, because that same year, Warner Brothers offered John a deal. Their offer was Blockbuster would have rights to rent new DVD releases before they went on sale to the general public. But in exchange, Blockbuster would give Warner Brothers 40% of rental fees, a deal they already had in place for VHS tapes. And this was during the time when DVDs were emerging as the new home video medium. But John declined the offer, and Walmart took it instead. And over time, Walmart became Warner Brothers' single largest source of revenue. In 2000, Blockbuster attempted to break into the growing video-on-demand industry. So they partnered with defunct energy company Enron to create the service. The agreement was supposed to last for 20 years, but in March 2001, Enron terminated the deal as they questioned Blockbuster's ability to provide sufficient films for the service. And that same year, Blockbuster also turned down the opportunity to buy a small DVD subscription company called Netflix for $50 million. But just a few years later, in 2004, Blockbuster launched a service similar to Netflix on their website called Blockbuster Online, where customers could rent DVDs and have them sent to their house, attempting to compete with Netflix's growing business. But it didn't smash Netflix in the way they hoped. And on top of this, 2004 is the last year Blockbuster would grow as a company. It's all downhill from here. But I don't think anything hurt them more than this. I believe this was one of the worst decisions Blockbuster made. In 2005, they began a campaign called No More Late Fees, and this caused two major issues. First off, a solid 15% of Blockbuster's revenue came from late fees. And when you're running $1 billion company, that's a loss of hundreds of millions of dollars. But that's not even the worst part, because their whole No More Late Fees campaign was kind of a lie, or false advertising at best. Because if you didn't return a movie on time, no big deal, you weren't charged a late fee. But after a certain amount of days passed without you returning the video, you'd purchase the video at full price and get to keep it. But this made people furious and resulted in Blockbuster paying out over $450 million in late fee refund coupons. In July 2007, they appointed James W. Keyes, former president of 7-Eleven, as the company's new chairman and CEO. The first move Keyes made as a CEO was, he acquired a company called MovieLink for $6.6 million. This allowed Blockbuster to move away from their unprofitable DVD by mail program in favor of a video streaming service. But as competition from companies like Redbox and Netflix grew, Blockbuster ignored them, shrugged them off, and chose to focus on Walmart and Apple as their primary competition. But in March 2010, Blockbuster made a last-ditch effort to save the company and get revenue pumping again by reintroducing late fees, rebranded as ADRs, or additional daily rates, which didn't go over well with customers. And by October of that year, Blockbuster had just over 3,400 stores, down from the 6,500 they had at the beginning of the year. And on July 1st, 2010, they were delisted from the New York Stock Exchange after its shareholders failed to pass a reverse stock split plan, which spelled the absolute end for Blockbuster. They filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy on September 23rd, 2010, due to their intense losses and over $900 million in debt. But even though they were in a horrible place financially, Dish Network still expressed interest in acquiring Blockbuster. In a bidding war against a South Korean telecommunications company, Dish Network won and purchased Blockbuster for $320 million, and still technically owns them to this day. By 2014, less than 100 Blockbuster locations existed worldwide, but were doing horrible, and by 2015, they knew it was over. At this point, Blockbuster stores could only remain open by paying a licensing fee to Dish. but there was no longer a corporate entity to provide supplies of branded products, forcing franchisees to create their own. And by the time 2018 rolled around, they were down to 9 locations, which dwindled down to 1 by August of that year. First and foremost, the 2 biggest reasons for Blockbuster's fail were poor leadership and poor decision making. But those 2 things alone don't tell a story, so let me give you a few examples. It could be argued that their business model was flawed from the start, because from 1996 to 2010, they were only profitable for 2 of those years, which makes you question whether or not they ever had a viable business model in place. On top of this, they had almost $1 billion in debt after their dealings with Viacom, and the choice to focus on Walmart and Apple as their biggest competitors showed they had a clear misunderstanding of the way the market was shifting. Because even when they tried to adapt by having an online DVD subscription or streaming service, it failed because they were just reacting to the moves Netflix was making and not thinking in terms of the long game. But the thing is, with the right leadership and decision-making skills, they could have reacted to Netflix in a way that could have crushed them. But instead, they declined Netflix's offer because they felt invincible, which is also what happened with the Warner Brothers DVD deal John Antioco declined. This quote from former CEO James Keyes says it all. I've been frankly confused by this fascination that everybody has with Netflix. Netflix doesn't really have or do anything that we can't or don't already do ourselves. Previous franchise owner Ken Tischer said in 2015, Blockbuster, if it isn't already, is going to go into the Harvard Business Review for how to not run a business or how to run a business into the ground. So when it comes to the question of what killed Blockbuster, look no further than Blockbuster. And I have just one question for you. Do you think the fall of Blockbuster could have been prevented, or was it inevitable? Let me know down in the comments below, and check out this next video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.